Have you ever had to gather evidence against your own parents? After a crane accident shattered my spine, a settlement check worth $124,000 was issued in my name, but it never reached me. The truth I wasn't prepared for? Sometimes the person stealing from you is the same one who makes your dinner. I discovered someone had forged my signature, and the handwriting looked alarmingly like my father's. I was still learning how to walk again, but I followed the ash trails, the burnt envelopes, the careful lies, all the way to court. In this video, you'll learn how to detect and respond to financial betrayal inside your own family, how to legally reclaim what's yours, even while healing, and why protecting your boundaries matters more than keeping the peace. I recorded their denials, got the handwriting verified, and faced them with the truth under oath. If you're dependent on someone, financially, physically, emotionally, don't ignore the signs, because once trust is drained, it takes more than strength to stand tall again. Before we dive into the story, I'd love to get to know you a little better. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. That way, I can send you a special shout-out. Now, let's begin our story together. I used to measure progress by how many steps I could take before my legs began to shake. Lately, I've been counting something smaller, how many questions I can ask before mom's voice goes high and thin. Recovery, I'd been warned, would test my spine and my patience. No one mentioned it might test my trust. January light slid across the living room carpet, bright and brittle like spun sugar. Mom had lavender candles burning on every flat surface. For calm, she said. They blended with the smell of meatloaf in the oven and the faint medicinal note of my pain cream. Dad had carried my old desk downstairs so I could reach it without the staircase. It sat against the front window, flanked by a walker on one side and a basket of pill bottles on the other. Outside, snow rimmed the curb, turning the whole block into a silent postcard. Inside, the house felt cheerful on purpose, the way hospital gift shops try to outshine the beeping down the hall. I clicked open my email to a familiar banner from Ridgeview Physical Therapy. Balance, $0. Applied per settlement. Settlement? I frowned and opened the patient portal. The claim history showed a neat line of text. Check issued December 9th, delivered December 13th. The numbers meant little on their own, but they suggested something had already been taken care of. Something large. Mom breezed in, carrying a glass of water nested in a holiday coaster. "Time for meds," she chirped, like a nurse announcing rounds. "Thanks," I said, swallowing the pills. "Hey, did any mail come for me back in December? Official stuff?" She adjusted the blanket over my knees, eyes on the fabric. "Nothing important, just catalogs and holiday cards." "Why?" "Ridgeview shows a settlement check was delivered." I kept my tone light. Thought maybe it was buried under tree shipping coupons. Mom's smile stiffened at the corners. "I would have noticed, honey. The post office was late on everything this year. Maybe it's in their system, but not actually here." "Maybe," I echoed. She changed the subject to weekend soup recipes, then left to stir the meatloaf glaze. The hallway smelled sweeter than the kitchen. Around 5, Dad came in, brushing snow off his jacket and stomping heavy boots. At dinner, he passed the mashed potatoes before anyone asked and launched into a lecture on junk mail. "You wouldn't believe the piles they dump in December," he said, shaking his head. "Nobody sends real letters anymore. And checks? Who even uses those these days?" Mom gave me a quick glance that felt like a nudge under the table. I scooted my walker back after dessert, pretending the tile glare bothered my eyes, and excused myself early. Upstairs, technically the downstairs guest room that had become my sanctuary, I settled into the recliner the insurer had paid for. The one Dad half-joked looked like a rocket chair. It hummed softly as I elevated my feet, bone-meeting hardware in careful alignment. I opened the laptop again and logged into Blue Point Insurance. Same policy number, same portal. A new line flickered into view I hadn't noticed before. Check cashed, December 22nd. Cashed. My pulse thudded in places I still couldn't feel properly. I stared until the numbers blurred, then leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. Late December, memories rearrange themselves. Dad cleaning the living room after Christmas breakfast, tossing ribbon, boxes, and a stack of envelopes into the fireplace. I'd teased him about overdoing it. He'd laughed, said, "Keeps the clutter down," and closed the screen with a metal clang. I eased myself upright, testing the steadiness of my legs. The porch felt miles away, but I needed the cold to think. Each step with the walker was deliberate. Left foot, breath, right foot, breath, pain, a slow metronome of willpower. Outside, icy air scraped my lungs awake. The porch light illuminated a tidy path Dad had shoveled earlier. He was always practical, always making things look easy. I tightened the cardigan around my shoulders. Dependence was supposed to be temporary, a bridge between the accident and the life I'd returned to. Tonight the bridge felt narrow, and the river beneath it darker than I'd admitted. Back inside, I sat at the desk again. The house was quiet except for the dishwasher and the click of Dad's remote somewhere down the hall. I refreshed the portal, half expecting the word cash to disappear. It stayed, bold and undeniable. If I didn't cash it, who did? The cursor blinked in the search bar, waiting. I closed the laptop instead, letting the question hang in the lamplight like breath on a frozen window. The lavender candle had almost burned out, wax pooling at its center. I watched the flame struggle against the wick and wondered how long a small, steady light could survive in a room determined to look bright. And for the first time since the crane accident that shattered my vertebrae, the ache in my back felt secondary to the weight settling in my chest. A late January blizzard pressed its white weight against the windows, turning the house into a muffled shell. Mom set a mug beside my laptop, chamomile, 1 sugar, the way she's made it since I was 10. "Of course we'd tell you if something arrived," she said, smiling just wide enough for manners. The steam curled under my chin, but her words settled colder than the storm. Dad's old warning drifted back. No secrets in this house. He'd found a speeding ticket under my mattress in high school before I could think up an excuse. I used to brag that nothing slipped past him. Now I wished it had. I scrolled through phone contacts with mitten-stiff fingers and tapped doctor. Felder, billing. The call rang twice. "Emily, good afternoon," he greeted over a faint buzz of office printers. "Everything all right with your invoices?" "Mostly. I noticed my account shows a settlement payment. Can you confirm when it was delivered?" "We issued a check December 13th, he said. "Tracking shows it reached your home 3 days later." 3 days after, Dad had fed the fireplace with unopened envelopes. I pictured the orange flare, how quickly paper turns to light. "Could you email me an image of the endorsement?" "Certainly. Give me an hour." Mom passed through again, refilling the humidifier. She caught the tail end of the call, emailed copy, and the color in her cheeks rose like heat through snow. "Need anything else, honey?" "I'm good," I replied. Her footsteps paused, then continued to the hallway. The heater kicked on, rattling the vent. I opened a fresh note on my phone and titled it Plan B. The words looked ominous, so I added a password. Insurance information, PT statements, every date I could remember. I typed until my back throbbed. Dependence teaches you to hoard facts the way winter teaches squirrels to hoard acorns. Snow thickened outside, burying the mailbox in a drifting white collar. Dad stomped in, shaking ice from his coat. "Storm of the decade," he announced. His eyes went to the spreadsheet on my screen. "Still tracking your pennies?" "Just staying organized." He shrugged, but his jaw tightened. The television in the den blared a talk show about decluttering. Mom always turned the volume up during storms, as if cheerful voices could melt ice. Dad leaned against the doorframe. "You're digging into stuff you don't understand," he said. "We've been managing everything just fine." "I'm sure you have your reasons," I answered, keeping my tone even, the way physical therapists coach you to keep breathing through pain. He left for the kitchen. A minute later, I heard the cabinet shut with more force than necessary. My phone buzzed. New message, Jake. "Blizzard's brutal. Stay warm, cuz." I typed a quick thanks and told him I'd explain something later. Before I could hit send, Dr. Felder's email arrived. The subject line read, "Endorse check, Blue Point claim." I opened the attachment. My name sat on the payee line, but the scrawl on the back wasn't mine. The loops were wider, the E too ornate. I zoomed in. A fleck of ash smudged one corner, as if the check had brushed soot. I forwarded the image to Jake with no explanation. His reply came so fast I imagined him staring at the screen in disbelief. "Emily, that handwriting looks a lot like your dad's. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless." The room spun gently. I steadied myself against the desk. Outside, wind carved lines into the snowbank. Inside, another kind of drift was forming, one built of doubts layering until nothing felt level. Dinner smelled of Mom's beef stew, a recipe she'd promised would stick to my ribs. I took my place at the table, Walker folded nearby. Candlelight reflected in the polished oak, but the warmth felt borrowed. Halfway through the meal, I cleared my throat. "Dad, did you sign a check from Blue Point Insurance?" His spoon stopped mid-air. Gravy dripped once, twice. He set it down with controlled care. "You weren't ready to handle that kind of money," he said. "Healing and responsibility don't always mix." Silence soaked the room. Mom's eyes filled, but she didn't contradict him. My hands trembled under the table, part anger, part neuropathy, and I laced my fingers to hide the shake. "It was issued to me," I said quietly. "My signature belongs on it." Dad exhaled through his nose, the way he does when a wrench slips and scrapes his knuckles. "We'll discuss this when you're stronger." "I'm strong enough to ask," I answered. The words tasted metallic. He pushed back his chair. "Dinner's over." His footsteps faded down the hallway, door closing with a decisive click. Mom gathered dishes without meeting my eyes. Later, in my room, I opened the top drawer for my insurance folder. Empty. The files I'd stacked so neatly beside my journal were gone. Cold spread through my chest faster than the storm outside. I sat on the bed's edge, snow-bright moonlight cutting a line across the floorboards. My phone lay face down, buzzing again. Another message from Jake, no doubt brimming with questions. I couldn't read it yet. Instead, I downloaded a call recording app, thumb hovering over allow microphone access. Trust, once cracked, rarely seals perfectly again. Dad's words echoed. No secrets in this house, but secrets, it turned out, were only forbidden to children. I slid the phone under my pillow, feeling its small, rectangular weight. The heater hummed, muffled by the storm. Somewhere down the hall, the television glowed through a half-closed door, filling the dark with other people's uncomplicated laughter. Outside, wind sculpted new drifts against the porch, erasing footprints before morning. Inside, I rehearsed questions no storm could bury. Questions that would have to be answered soon, whether anyone in this house believed I was ready or not. You do not expect to need evidence against your own parents. Yet that Monday, I wheeled myself into a modest law office on Oak Street, carrying a flash drive full of emails and a heart that felt heavier than my walker. Monica Reyes stood as soon as I entered. She was in her mid-40s, neat gray suit, no-nonsense haircut, smile that reached her eyes without wasting time. A row of succulents lined her windowsill, their green calm against a February sky the color of steel. Certificates from Georgetown and CU Boulder framed the wall behind her desk. Everything about the room whispered competence. "Emily Carter," she said, shaking my hand. "Jake told me you might call." I took the visitor chair and arranged the walker beside me. "I never thought I would be here discussing my parents," I began, and the word parents tasted misplaced. "Linda and George, I mean." Monica touched a legal pad. "Tell me what happened, start to finish." So I told her. The accident, the spinal hardware, the months of dependence, the missing check, the fireplace memory, the scanned endorsement that did not belong to me. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "What you are describing meets several civil criteria," she said. "Constructive fraud, conversion, possibly elder-style financial exploitation, though you are obviously not elderly." She glanced at my walker. "The key is proving intent and control. We have the endorsement, the deposit confirmation, and your medical vulnerability at the time the check arrived." She listed what she would need: my surgery summary, copy of the insurance policy, banking statements from my old savings account, any text or voice proof that Linda or George denied the check existed. I opened my purse and set a recorder on the desk. "I started documenting," I said. "This was last night." I pressed play. My own voice filled the room, shaky but clear. "Mom, Ridgeview says the money was mailed weeks ago." "There is no check, sweetheart. You are imagining things again." Monica paused the file. "That is useful. Shows denial after the fact." She clicked her pen, jotting bullet points. "I will prepare a demand letter. It does not obligate you to file, but it puts them on notice. We can ask for full restitution plus fees." A tremor ran through my hands, partly neuropathy, partly dread. "What happens if they refuse?" "Then we sue." She slid a draft template across the desk, crisp paper smelling of toner. "Do you want to send this?" I looked at the heading, Reyes and Stanton, LLP, Notice of Intent, and saw Linda's face reading it, wide with hurt, maybe anger. George would probably say I was overreacting again. I swallowed. "I want them to see it with their own eyes." Monica nodded once. "We will serve it by certified mail." Back home, the kitchen was full of polite quiet. Linda set a sandwich on the counter and said, "Lunch, if you're hungry." George rinsed a mug without looking at me. I thanked her and carried the plate to the desk, but I barely tasted a bite. I spent the afternoon gathering what Monica needed: operative reports, pharmacy receipts, the email from Blue Point confirming deposit into a joint account under George Carter. Each PDF felt like stacking bricks between me and the people down the hall. Just before dusk, Jake called. The storm had let up and his ambulance shift was slow. I told him about the meeting and the draft letter. He whistled low. "I know a retired detective who does handwriting verification," he said. "He owes me a favor from last summer's wildfire. You want me to ask?" "Yes," I breathed. "Please." "Already texted him your sample." He hesitated. "How are you holding up?" I watched wind lift powdery snow from the porch rail, spiraling it into the pale sky. "Proof is a lonely word," I said, "but loneliness feels safer than doubt." Jake was quiet, then gave a soft laugh. "That is the most Emily sentence I have ever heard. I will check in tomorrow." After we hung up, I locked my bedroom door for the first time since moving back. The click sounded final. I pulled the walker close, sat on the edge of the recliner, and opened Plan B on my phone. Dates, amounts, voice memos, even screenshots of George's fireplace habits. I felt strangely calm, like lining silverware in a drawer after a funeral. Small order against big chaos. From the hallway, Linda's voice floated, too bright. "Dinner at 6, George." She did not knock on my door. I realized she had not called me honey all day. I saved the note, enabled encrypted backup, and slid the phone beneath the pillow. My eyes traced the ceiling seams. In my head, I tried on new language. Linda said, George decided. Each name fit like a coat I had outgrown but somehow still owned. At 9, the email ping from Jake arrived. "You have solid matches on 3-letter forms. He can testify." Then a second message followed 5 seconds later. "Whatever happens next, I've got your back." I stared at the words until they blurred, then let the phone screen dim. Downstairs, a door clicked, and footsteps moved toward the living room. The house, once a cradle, now felt like an evidence locker, every object tagged and dated. I closed my eyes, listening to the heater breathe. The line between family and litigant was growing sharper, and I was the one drawing it. Snow had stopped falling, but the air still carried that hollow February hush when the certified letter arrived. I heard the mail truck sputter away and watched Dad, George, I corrected myself, shuffle down the driveway in his slippers to meet it. He signed for the thick envelope without looking at the return address. When he came back inside, he left a trail of slush across the tile and laid the letter on the hall table as though it were junk mail. He kept his back to me, shoulders squared, reading the sender's name twice before retreating to the den. I waited, heart steady, then slipped the envelope into my tote beside the walker. The seal from Monica's office looked stark against my scarf. A decade ago, Dad would have joked that anything stamped ST, certified Huss, was grown-up trouble. Now grown-up trouble had come home to roost, and no one was joking. That evening, I asked them to join me in the kitchen. Linda folded a dish towel in nervous loops while George leaned on the counter, arms crossed. I held the letter like a fragile plate. "This is a formal demand for the return of my settlement," I said. "You'll each receive a copy by mail and by email. We have 14 days to resolve this privately." George's jaw flexed. "We?" he echoed, as if the word offended him. "It's between family," Linda pleaded, voice already trembling. "That's why I brought it here first." My tone stayed level, and that surprised me most. "But if we can't solve it here, the next step is the court." George's fist landed on the countertop with a dull thud before he walked out the back door, screen slamming behind him. Linda crumpled into a chair, tears slipping over the rim of her composure. I stood until her crying softened to hiccups, then set the envelope on the table and wheeled my walker toward the hallway. Dad's boots thumped outside like muffled thunder. Dinner simmered untouched on the stove. At 6 sharp, Linda plated my childhood favorite, mac and cheese with chopped hot dogs, and set it in front of me. The cheddar smelled exactly like Saturday afternoons when homework mixed with cartoons, but the nostalgia tasted sour. I pushed the plate away. She didn't press, only lowered her eyes and ate in soundless bites. The fork against her teeth was the loudest thing in the room. Later, I stepped onto the porch for fresh air. Ruth from next door shuffled down her walk with scraps for the compost bin. Usually we traded garden tips or weather gossip. Tonight, when I raised a mittened hand, she busied herself with the lid and hurried back inside, nearly tripping on the doormat. The porch light carved pale halos in the snow, highlighting the emptiness between her house and ours. Inside, my phone buzzed. Aunt Cheryl calling. I let it ring twice before answering. "Sweetheart," she began, honey layered over steel, "your mother's beside herself. You're really going to drag them to court?" "It isn't about money, Aunt Cheryl. It's about trust." "Families survive on grace," she said. "Think of your health, not lawyers." "My health depends on boundaries," I replied, a line Monica had coached me to believe. "Boundaries keep grace alive." She sighed, a sound like a curtain falling. "Some folks forget where they came from," she muttered, then ended the call. Minutes later, a notification flashed. "Cheryl has unfriended you." Scrolling through my feed, I noticed 2 cousins missing, and Uncle too. A new post hovered from a distant relative. "Blood is thicker than lawsuits." No name attached, but I recognized the living room wallpaper in the profile photo. It stung, yet I also felt lighter, as if the crowd in my head had thinned. That night, I took my tray to my room and locked the door before anyone could protest. I organized files into labeled stacks, letters, bank, medical, aligning every page until the edges made a clean square. Though exhaustion nipped at my temples, I found comfort in order. A quiet philosophy Mom used to quote surfaced, "A tidy room keeps the mind from rattling." The irony didn't escape me, but the rule still worked. Near midnight, hushed voices drifted from the kitchen, Linda asking if they should apologize, George insisting lawyers only wanted fees. I recorded 30 seconds through the cracked door, not for evidence, but to remind myself tomorrow that I hadn't dreamed the distance between us. Morning brought pale sunshine and the smell of reheated stew. I slid into the kitchen, Kane tapping once for balance. Linda stood at the sink, shoulders hunched. "I made toast," she said, without turning. Her voice sounded smaller than the night before. I reached for the kettle, poured a mug of water, and let the steam warm my face. "There's something on the counter you should read," I said. She turned, eyes red. The court notice lay beside the mail basket, official seal catching the light. She picked it up with trembling fingers, lips already quivering. "We were just trying to protect you," she whispered, tears tracking down her cheeks. "You weren't strong enough yet. We did what we had to do." I steadied myself, feeling the ache in my lower back pulse. "Linda," I said, her name tasting foreign yet deliberate. "Protecting someone doesn't mean silencing them." She covered her face, sobbing into her palms. Somewhere in another room, a clock ticked, steady as pulse. I slipped the notice into a manila folder and set it squarely on the counter. My voice came out calm, the way water finds its level after a storm. "Then you can explain that under oath." I carried my mug down the hall, door clicking shut behind me. In the quiet of my room, I opened the Notes app and added a single line to Plan B. They crossed the line today. I didn't move it. They did. Then I breathed slowly, knowing the next sound I'd hear would be the hinge of a courtroom door swinging open, ready or not. Mid-March sunlight spilled across Monica's desk, doing its best to soften the stack of paper in front of me. It didn't work. The first page of the deposition began with a polite oath and ended with a price tag, because the truth doesn't just hurt, sometimes it invoices you. Monica tapped a manicured finger on the margin. "Remember what I said about court questions?" "Never ask one unless you already know the answer," I recited. "Exactly. Now read." I adjusted the lumbar cushion, steadying my back and my nerves, and started with George's transcript. His words marched down the page in crisp courier type. Q. Why didn't you tell your daughter about the insurance money? A. She wasn't stable enough. It was for her own good. Stable. As if I were a rickety shelf he'd bolted to the wall without permission. Linda's deposition followed, softer in tone but sharper in deflection. Q. Did you intend to keep the funds? We planned to give it back, eventually, but she was paranoid. It made recovery harder. Paranoid. The ink blurred for a moment, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. The next exhibit listed withdrawals. $28,000 toward credit card balances, $6,000 for a whole house water system. One I'd never used because lugging myself downstairs had been too painful that week. I flipped another page. Linda had cried during her testimony. The court reporter noted each pause. George had answered in clipped sentences, confident enough to sign his name at the end. How much of this can I read aloud in court? I asked, voice low. Monica closed the folder. As much as it takes, she said. Every line is admissible. Outside, the parking lot was a glare of thawing snow. I eased into my borrowed sedan, transcript heavy in my lap, and let the seat warmer hum away the chill. My phone buzzed. Jake. New text. You already knew, he wrote. Now it's just written down. I managed a half smile. Knowing still hurts, I typed back. But at least pain has company. Back at my new studio, everything was still in boxes except the essentials. A futon, a lamp, and a kettle. Minimalist by necessity. Healing by design. I set the transcript on a folding table and made tea, the steam fogging the only window. In that silence, I practiced saying their house instead of home and found it strangely easy. While the tea cooled, I scrolled through rental receipts, medical statements, bank alerts. Each digital ping felt like a metronome keeping time until the trial. When the kettle clicked off, I found an envelope wedged under the door. Postmark Larimer County Court. I slid it open with a butter knife. Trial date, May 9th, 2023. The room felt smaller suddenly, but also clearer. I pressed the paper flat, inhaling the scent of fresh ink, and imagined walking into the courtroom 2 months from now. Cane steady, voice steady. Nothing left to wonder about. Another text arrived from Jake. Need anything for the weekend? Groceries? Moral support? Yes, I replied. Potatoes and moral support in that order. He sent back a thumbs up emoji, and I let it be. The heater kicked on, rattling softly. An honest noise, one that asked nothing and gave just enough. I sipped lukewarm tea, closed the transcript, and slid it into the accordion file marked evidence. Labels made things neat. Neatness made them bearable. Outside, twilight settled over the rooftops, violet on snow. I thought about George tightening a wrench on the new water system, Linda wiping sawdust from a countertop paid for with my future, both of them believing love could excuse omission. Love is many things, I decided, but it is never permission to rewrite someone else's ledger. I locked the apartment door, not out of fear but ritual, and drew the blinds. Then I opened a blank document titled Opening Statement Draft 1 and typed the first sentence. Your Honor, acceptance is not the same as consent. The words looked stark, but they were mine. And for the first time all winter, I felt taller than the cane beside me. Justice arrived without fanfare that May morning. The courthouse hallway smelled of lemon polish and old carpet, as though someone had tried to scrub away every argument ever spoken there. Tulips outside the window bent in a light breeze, heads together like jurors conferring. I centered my cane on the marble tile and followed Monica toward courtroom 3. My breath stayed slow, the way physical therapy taught me when a step felt taller than it was. Inside, the air held a hush that reminded me of church before Easter service. George sat at the defendant's table, spine rigid under a navy jacket. He studied the brass light fixture overhead as if it held the answers. Linda dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though no tears had fallen yet. She did not look up when I took my seat. The judge entered, robes stirring like a quiet wave. Monica opened our file, evidence labels facing the ceiling, and nodded once. Her confidence felt like a hand on my shoulder. When it was my turn, I rose, steadied my balance, and spoke. I described the accident, the settlement, the endorsement I never signed. I read Linda's recorded words, then George's. We were protecting her. My voice did not tremble. Every syllable landed softer than anger, firmer than apology. Monica guided me only with her eyes, reminding me of the rule. Tell the story, trust the proof. George avoided eye contact, jaw set, a marble version of the father who once taught me to skip rocks. Linda cried openly now, shoulders folding inward, but she did not plead. Maybe fatigue had replaced denial, or maybe she finally understood that tears could not revise a bank statement. The judge reviewed the exhibits, glasses perched low. The tick of the courtroom clock measured each page turn. Finally, she spoke. Restitution of $90,000, payable within 30 days. Legal fees to be reimbursed. The gavel sounded like a soft tap on a door someone was already opening. Outside on the steps, sunshine warmed the limestone. Linda approached, hand gripping her purse strap. I hope this made you feel better, she said, voice small. It made me feel like myself again, I answered. I did not add more. Spring air carried the scent of freshly mown grass, and the street was bright with traffic moving toward ordinary errands, groceries, appointments, baseball practice. Life kept going, indifferent to verdicts. That evening in Boulder, my studio windows were open to the fading light. Boxes of books lined one wall, each waiting for a shelf. I assembled a simple desk by the window, the kind with clean lines and nothing to distract. On its surface, I placed a mug, a lamp, and my laptop. I typed in the site for a health advocacy certificate, something I'd bookmarked but never dared to start. The form asked for a name, an address, a goal statement. My fingers answered without pause. A knock sounded. Jake stepped inside with a toolbox and a smile that looked half relief, half pride. Together we leveled 2 pine shelves above the desk. He said little, just handed me anchors and screws, letting the drill's hum fill the room. When we finished, he hung a small framed quote he'd brought. Protect your peace, even from the people who gave you life. He hugged me, no words needed, and left before dusk turned to dark. I brewed chamomile tea, steam curling toward the fresh paint scent. Outside, students biked past, laughter trailing like ribbon. Their freedom felt close, like a song I almost remembered. Cup in hand, I stood at the window. The curtains brushed my wrist, light fabric for warmer days ahead. My phone rested silent on the counter. For the first time in months, I didn't glance at it, didn't wait for a message that might not come. Instead, I listened to the gentle clink of the spoon against porcelain and the soft percussion of a neighbor's screen door. I sat at the new desk, opened the application portal, and reviewed each field one last time. The cursor blinked, patient as ever. I pressed submit. The confirmation page appeared, plain and satisfying, no fanfare needed. "No one speaks for me again," I whispered, not as a threat, but as a promise. Outside, the tulips nodded under a street lamp's glow, and the night settled quiet and sure around my new beginning. That night, as I sat beside my window with the tulips just beginning to close for the evening, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, peace that didn't need permission. The courtroom gave me justice, but it was reclaiming my voice that truly set me free. Sometimes the people we trust most cross lines they never should. And while forgiveness may come later, boundaries often need to come first. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal. It's a form of love, too. If this story reminded you of your own journey or someone you once had to let go of to heal, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your reflections. I'm listening. And if this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories about resilience and hope. Thanks for watching.